Hey, this is Donna Nova, the Transdimensional Twin Flame and the Afterlife Artist. I am here with a channeled session number 23 of the Melafon journals. Melafon being the extraterrestrial that I met during a blind remote viewing session a couple of months ago this year. And I reconnected with him in a second session as we were taught to do. And he was such a beautiful being that I asked him if he could be my guide, and he confirmed that that was why he was coming to me in the first place. And he asked me, if I wanted to connect with him and learn that the best way to do it was in the morning without getting on the phone or social media or checking emails or messages or anything like that, and to stay in a more liminal space so it would be easier to channel. So what I try to do every few days is every day I do what he said and stay off the phone. It's a hard habit to break. I'm sure most people know that. I mean, if that's not a problem for you, I respect that for sure, because it's been a problem for me. So he's helping me with my habits. I mean, my guides have been telling me to stop getting on the phone for years. It's not news, but I'm trying to really do it this time because he's volunteering to help me. He said he's been waiting, and the things he says really make sense to me. So I'm not really sure what I'm doing here. I don't necessarily expect people to believe that that's who I'm talking to, but it doesn't matter. Even with Bashar and Daryl Anka, I fully believe that Daryl and Bashar are who they say they are, and that they are doing what they say they're doing. In that, Daryl is channeling Bashar, who is an extraterrestrial, who is a first contact specialist with our species, here to help us with the imminent open contact with extraterrestrials that we're going through. I mean, we're going through it now, but not everybody is on board, and it hasn't been, announced by any governments, really. I don't expect that to really happen. I think they will only say what they know when they are forced to say it, because they've known these things for decades, and they've kept technology from us that could have saved thousands of lives and improved every life. But because of selfish greed, they haven't. So these aren't the people that are looking out for you and going to tell you about the aliens. They've known about it forever, and they don't want to tell you. So people like Melafon, beings like him that are from somewhere else off this planet, maybe another dimension, maybe another solar system, maybe another universe, or just a faraway place in this universe. These beings are coming to those of us who are ready and who've done the work to be able to perceive their communication accurately, because it needs to be accurate. There's a lot of egos out there that are, claiming to do this work, and they're not. They're still working through their ego. And that's one of the most insidious tricks of the ego, is when people have an opening of a spiritual gift or an awareness, like a spiritual awakening. One of the first tests is to see if you can handle it without going and getting an even more inflated ego. And what I've seen is that, I don't know the percentage, but a large percentage of people who go through, spiritual awakenings and are given the opportunity, to go on that path, they instantly fall off the path because they don't learn what shadow work and ego work and inner child work are. It's not just one thing, it's all of it. And if you don't know what your ego does, or who you really are beyond the ego with the higher self, if you're not connected to that higher self beyond the ego, then you're not channeling anybody. You're not really helping anybody. You're actually just creating more confusion and more distortion for yourself and other people, which means you really didn't awaken in this lifetime. And if you don't have more awareness and, take that hint, you're gonna be just in another level of your ego. You're gonna be in the one that is deluded enough to think that it's connecting to the divine, when really it's just your own self-interest. And it's very different. There's a huge difference between somebody who's really connected to the higher realms and the Akashic records and the divine goddess, the creator of everything, source. There's a huge difference between people that are connected that way for real and people who claim to be, but are still actually only projecting from their egos. They're completely different things. And a lot of the spiritual community is now filled with people who are just even more inflated in their egos than they were before. Because, most of us didn't come into this life spiritually awake. I mean, if we did, we forgot. We might have been there at the beginning when we were little, but most of us forgot. And when we find it again, it's a chance to, it's a crossroads. It's a chance to choose. Are you going to go beyond your human, small, egoic story and the small version of yourself? There's nothing wrong with this version of yourself. It's still true. I mean, but there's more beyond that. So today, I didn't know what Melafon was going to talk about. And I guess what I was getting at with Daryl and Bashar is that their information works. It really kind of doesn't matter if Bashar is an alien and Daryl is channeling him or not, because the information is accurate. I don't really see where the information would come from if it wasn't what he says it is, because clearly this person is tapped into a higher knowledge that turns out to be accurate in a lot of the way, in the ways that we can verify. There's things that we can't verify that he says, but when you take the body of work over the last 40 years, it's consistent. And if you use the advice to basically live by his formula, it's very simple. And it's the same formula that every enlightened teacher teaches, because this is like spiritual truth. There's not really that many ways you can interpret divine truth. There's one source, and there are certain laws, and you can describe it in infinite ways, and you can interpret it, within yourself. But to be truly connected to that higher knowledge, that's not going to come from your ego. So basically, whether I'm channeling Melafon or not, I am connecting to the divine, because I do this work all the time to make sure that I don't get stuck in my ego self, because it's still there just like everybody else's. But it's a practice, and it's a repeated practice that I've gone through for 11 years to refine and hone my skills, so that I recognize when I'm acting from my ego and then what to do about it, how to get out of that and go back into my higher self to connect to the real information. Because your ego doesn't give you all the information. It just gives you the information that it wants you to know, so that you'll make a small-minded choice out of fear. Because the ego wants you to feel separate, and it's afraid a lot because it wants your survival. So it's a very base level survival that it wants. It's like, the reptilian brain that people talk about, where it's your instincts. This is like, your lower instincts trying to protect you all the time. So that's the topic of today's channeling. And I'm going to just flip the camera. I've been letting Melafon decide what we talk about. I might have something on my mind, and then he will just address it. So I meditated for a long time today, because I don't want to bring a lot of thoughts into this practice. We are taught not to bring our cares and worries into this practice. So I just meditated as long as it took until I felt clear. And then I started to channel him and just let him lead. So like I always say, I am legally blind. And I've tried to read these pages through the phone, and I've tried to do it different ways so that you can see the whole page while I'm reading, but it's hard to do that, and I think it would be better for you to hear me reading it more fluidly instead of trying to strain to read it. So I'm gonna I'll show you each picture, but then each page, but then I'm gonna hold it closer so I can read it. So sorry about that, but you can just listen along and try to understand the concepts while he's talking. I mean, he repeats a lot of these things because they're true. Spiritual truths are just spiritual truths. You can't really improve on simple divine truth. You can interpret it in different ways, but it's just still what it is, So here we go. As always, I draw us and connect us, and I am talking in this darker purpley red color, and then he's in the green, and mostly this is going to be just him talking. So he gives us a little list of things that we can do when we need to make decisions. So I said, "Good morning, Melafon. How are you today? And what should we talk about?" And he always jokes, "Good morning, human," or "Hello, human. How about we discuss how to remain centered, calm, and alert when you are faced with big decisions with many moving parts, like you are now?" And I said, "Yes, please." So that's true. I have some decisions to make that are really big for me. And, all this information is rolling around in my head. Like, what about this? What about that? What do I do about this? What about that? I got to do this. Got to do that. It's overwhelming. I hate that. You know what I mean? It can feel like decision paralysis and, fight, flight, or freeze. Sometimes I'll have like a freeze response when I get overwhelmed. So he's talking about that. Okay, so number 1, here is what he says. Number 1, let the waters get still and clear. Don't act out of haste and fear. Ooh, that rhymed. That was a good little poem. Let the waters get still and clear. Don't act out of haste or fear. Urgency doesn't create a clear field of vision. Calm does. Don't think you have to have everything solved or resolved all at once. Use your trust in the divine to prop you up. Certainty isn't even the goal of Earth School. Exploration and learning is. Try to see uncertainty as an exciting place with endless possibilities and no set path. All options are open. Then simply remain in your highest vibration, in clarity within yourself. The outside world doesn't need to be certain or all set up and tied up in a neat package for each person to have self-clarity, self-mastery. This is the point of Earth life. Self-mastery. Not mastery of others, not mastery of the outer world. Once you understand that the outer world is actually your own co-creation with your non-physical guides and helpers, you understand why mastery of your inner world is the key to what you're seeking. You on the inside is the focal point of everything else in your life. Unbalanced self equals unbalanced life. Calm, centered, authentic, and higher vibrational, healthy self equals that kind of life. So basically, whatever you are vibrating is what your life is going to be like on the outside. So if you're trying to fix your life from the outside, you're doing it backwards. You got to create a centered and balanced presence from your inside because you're vibrating that out all the time, and that's creating your outer reality. So you start at the foundation, which is yourself. Calm, centered, authentic, and high vibe, healing, healthy self equals that kind of life. The decisions you need to make won't actually take as much thought and will not be so much of a struggle when you're coming from that centered place of self-mastery. A person who has balanced their personal ecosystem will create natural conditions for the unfoldment of circumstances to be flowing and ultimately beneficial to that person. It's kind of like, it's just a way of saying go with the flow. Once you've created a balanced inner world, then you can go with the flow because you're creating a balanced outer world and you can trust it. So number 2 on his list of advice, he says, allow life to naturally unfold instead of attempting to manipulate it or other people. This is really important because most of us spent most of our lives thinking we needed to manipulate the outer reality or change other people, change their beliefs. If you ever argue with someone about their beliefs, then you think that you need to change that person for, towards your beliefs, which means you have an uncertainty about your beliefs. Because otherwise, a person who was sure in their own beliefs wouldn't need to convince anybody else of anything. And that's where that's where we all want to be, is so sure of ourselves. And I don't mean in an egoic, self-centered way. I mean, you're connected to the divine. You're connected to your self-mastery and your pure essence. And you know that other people's beliefs are their business. You don't have to believe the same thing as someone else. And they don't have to believe the same thing as you. Because they're not creating your reality. If you think other people are creating your reality, that's when you get scared and angry and claim that everybody else is making you respond certain ways, or if you claim to be triggered a lot, that means that you are giving other people power over your own life that they don't really have. They have it because you gave it to them. But if you would stop giving other people your power, you wouldn't worry about whether people agreed with you or not. A spiritually awakened person doesn't worry about if people agree with them or not. You can tell when somebody's still in their ego because they're still fighting. Like, why don't you believe what I believe? We have to all believe the same thing. That just shows that they are insecure because they need safety in numbers. So they need other people to believe like they do because they're not secure in what they believe in the first place. And none of that is well-balanced behavior. It's not guided behavior. It's not guided by spirit. And it's not spiritually awakened. So that's what he's talking about. Okay. So then he says, those who still come through their egoic selves focus on fixing their outer reality rather than sitting in the still point of their own higher selves. True power doesn't come from controlling others or the outer world. Sure, you still need to make decisions based on what needs arise, but it is no longer about controlling anything other than yourself. Responding with centered clarity and focus is the ultimate control. It has nothing to do with controlling others or circumstances. If you trusted the divine, you'd know there are no errors in the way of things. There are things you don't prefer, sure. But true change comes from inside. Life unfolds. Going with the natural flow is what truly intelligent people do. Access to the higher self's intelligence is only found by those who go beyond their smaller egoic selves. The ego is a self-imposed cage. It traps people in smallness, pettiness, cruelty, survival mode, anxiety, and fear. It is there to create a separation from others and create each individual perspective. We come here to experience this, but that's not all we come here for. So he's saying the ego has a purpose. You don't need to get rid of your ego, but if you're using it improperly, then you're actually not living an enlightened or awakened life. So he's just saying know what your ego's purpose is and what its purpose is not. We also come here to realize our ultimate connection to each other, everything in nature, and to the divine. Seeing beyond our small-minded, fear-based thoughts and behaviors is the only path to awakening. There is no awakening until this step beyond ego is taken. Trust in the divine is found beyond the ego self. Your belief writes your story. You either trust in the divine to always know what it's doing, even if you don't, or you trust in a universe and creator source that is clueless and needs you and your ego to take over. When you think about it in that way, it does sound like a no-brainer, doesn't it? The epitome of egotism is thinking you know better than the divine. So his third step here is to respond versus react. So when we have decisions to make, this is his third thing, which is respond with clarity instead of just reacting unconsciously. If you've accomplished what we just talked about, you consciously respond to life instead of unconsciously reacting. Those whose moods are already unstable will react with their egos. They take offense when there is no real reason to. I mean, you all know these people who are just constantly angry at nothing. That's their ego. Self-mastery is not being angry and triggered all the time. Like, you know what I mean? That's just not self-mastery at all. So this comes from fear, from their egos, trying to keep their self-image safe, feeling offended or triggered often is always a sign of someone who has not yet surpassed the ego and is not spiritually awakened behavior. Anyone can react from their unconscious wounds. If that's their norm, they are still spiritually asleep. If it's intermittent, they are awakening and going through the learning process. But when someone finally responds from that centered and non-egoic higher self place, they are fully awakened. So like, to the extent that you go beyond your ego to respond to life is the extent to which you're actually spiritually awakened. You know, it's not about having spiritual experiences or spiritual abilities. Spiritually awakening means you're connected to the divine and you come from that place. That's what it is. Realizing that the fear responses of the egoic self are well-meaning as far as they're trying to protect you, but unnecessary, is the phase of self-mastery, is the place of self-mastery. So realizing that your ego is trying to help you, but it's not necessary like that. It doesn't need to keep you safe in that way. This is true wisdom. To recognize your egoic self and your higher self as two separate parts of your ecosystem, and then to know when and how to employ both is the true goal. It was never about all the other people around you. You allowed them to affect you. Nobody forced you to allow this. Once you see that, you can stop it in the future. Okay, we're on our last 2 pages. Number 4. He says, find a quiet peace in the noise. This goes for the noise of society and other people, as well as yourself. Meditate in solitude. Go out in nature. Let your mind chatter die down. This is when you can connect to the higher self, wisdom, and true intelligence that you're seeking. It doesn't happen unless you give it room to be heard. You have to be quiet so you can hear these things. This communication is drowned out by the pollution, the noise pollution, and energetic pollution of society. So you have to, that's why meditation is important. That's how you connect to the divine and you connect to your inner higher self. Okay. Your energy creates ripple patterns in your reality. Ordered energy emanating from you is how your outer world is ordered. It will unfold with elegance when it is being created by a being that has created a harmonious energetic field. Body, mind, psyche, and spirit selves must all be in synchronous order for the outer reality to also become that way. So what he's saying is when you've mastered yourself and your energy and you're coming from this aligned place, your outer world reflects that. And then he showed me this image of like a person, and those are your energy waves, like a droplet of water. You know, you drop a drop of water into a lake or something, and you see the ripples going out. That's how our energy is. Your energy is coming from you and creating everything around you. That's it. So that's what he's talking about today. Okay, I hope that made sense. You can listen to it again if you like, or just write down the steps or screenshot those pages if you want to. Because this is really good advice, just like all of his advice. I use all of it. Sometimes it's things that I've already known, but like just needed to be reminded. But I think a lot of these things are things that he wants me to just share with whoever feels like listening, because he's just another teacher. He's a very enlightened being. I love connecting with him. That's why I wanted him to be my guide. So anyway, I hope that was helpful. There's a lot of confusion going on right now in the world, and a lot of people having to, figure out what's going on with the outer world. I mean, it's bonkers. And then everybody has an inner life, like their personal lives, but then their interior lives as well to deal with. So it can be overwhelming. And taking time out to connect to your higher self and disconnect from all the noise of society is just, you have to do it if you want this connection to your higher information. It'll help you in so many ways. You can make better decisions. You can get downloads. You can get true higher guidance and epiphanies that you're not going to get from your egoic self, because that's not its job. It's not connected to the higher realms at all. It's got a whole different job. So if you really want higher guidance, like visionaries have, that's what you got to tap into, because that's what visionaries like me are tapped into, and it really works. All right. Hope you have a great day. Thanks for watching.